Welcome to the Psychology World podcast. I'm Connor Whiteley, bringing you psychology news, articles, and other interesting psychology-related articles. Where can find the podcast notes and more interesting psychology-related things, and you can get your free 8 psychology book box set at connorwhiteley.net. Now let's get on to the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 124 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley. And today's episode is on 5 signs that you might want to start therapy. And I always know that the podcast is mainly for university psychology students and psychology professionals, but I still think that this is a really useful episode because by the time that I actually finished writing the blog post for it, I actually realised that the real point of today's episode was all about self-care. Because I'll talk more about this in the personal update, but I was out on Wednesday with a bunch of university students, and some of the stories from them and their friends, were actually quite heartbreaking. This is a really important episode, just in case we ever find ourselves in a situation, or our family, friends, or even our peers at work also find themselves in this situation though. So it might not sound like it, but this is a good food for thought episode. And it is Saturday, the 11th of December 2021, as I record this. So we're moving on to psychology news section. So we're going to be reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest, and there's some very interesting ones. And I really need to bite my tongue just so I don't go into the different political bits. Okay, so the first one is, conservatives are more likely to share fake news, but only if they're low in conscientiousness. So this is a mixture of a personality psychology and political psychology. Why do people share fake news? All kinds of studies have looked into what encourages it, and which personal attributes play a role. As the authors of a new paper in the Journal of Experimental Psychology General point out, multiple studies have found that political conservatives are relatively more likely to disseminate false news than those on the political left. However, their new work finds that this is another simplification, that this link is largely driven by conservatives who are low in conscientiousness. This is an important finding for a few reasons. On the upside, it's far less politically polarising message. On the downside, this group does not seem to be receptive to the main identified ways of stopping fake news from spreading. And just so I don't annoy half the podcast or even more, I'm going to try and speak very general here. So, well, as best as I can. Okay then. Well, so on the downside point, I think that's a pretty clear, from the news and how different governments respond stopping fake news. But then if we take a step back, this is really important that we actually do look at fake news, and we do actually identify what factors play into people spreading it, because fake news, it does cost lives, it does really harm people's livelihoods, the economy, and so many other different reasons. I would say it's a critical topic that we've got to focus on. But equally, saying that, we cannot afford to oversimplify stuff, especially when we say that all conservative people spread fake news, because of course that isn't true. So this is very interesting, and it's very important that we do continue to look at it. Okay, so the second one is, women are no more emotionally turbulent than men. And I'm laughing though, because that is one of the biggest stereotypes about women though. And that's why if you want to listen to some of the past episodes on other podcasts, and then if you also read some of my reflections, but also some of my books, then you know that I tend to take the mick out of that stereotype, because it's simply not true. Women are not on a stable emotional vector. So we're moving on to the article. Women are commonly assumed to be more emotionally turbulent than men, moodier, more violent, and more likely to experience rapid changes in affect across the course of the menstrual cycle. Aside from being the basis of many a sexist joke, this assumption has an impact on research, with cisgender women excluded from research due to apparent fluctuation in moods. That's bad. Building on research exploring fluctuations in rodents, a team from the University of Michigan has looked at more closely at such variability in humans. The study and scientific report finds no difference in emotional variance between cisgender men and women, or between women who would do or do not use oral contraception. So I don't think this is a surprise, and this really just does confirm what I've said all along. Women, they're not these turbulent emotional wrecks, and I know that a large percentage of the podcast is women, But I think it's absolutely wrong that women actually get excluded from research due to apparent fluctuations in mood. That's bad. That's just physically wrong. Full stop. Okay then. So, but the final one is: we generally prefer political allies who try to understand opponents' views. We often hear that we're living in an age of polarization and divisiveness, unable to transcend political boundaries to listen to those we disagree with. But how do we feel about those people who share our views, but who seek to understand opponents either way? This is the subject of a new study in psychological science, authored by the University of British Columbia's Gordon Hasenall, Christine Lauren. They find that whilst we generally prefer those who seek alternative views, this falters when they appear to be susceptible to changing sides. So this is a really interesting one because I never used to do this, but in the past few years, I really have been trying to understand the side to those because I'm not going to go into my personal politics, but I can think of two great examples that were. For example, there's a member in my family who is the complete opposite, and I mean, yeah, there is, without getting into details, yeah, just complete opposite. But whenever I go to see them and we talk about it, we're both very respectful, and they really don't try and even understand my point of view, though. But I try to understand theirs because I want to see why do they think that, or why do they think so a different to me though. And I actually did that this morning because me and my driving in structure, we were talking about some of the stuff that's going on in the news in the UK at the moment, and it was actually quite interesting to hear what she thought. All in all, I really do recommend just listening to people, just seeing why do they think that. Because if social psychology teaches us anything, it's actually really good to get outside of our own echo chambers and actually hear the other side. And not only does it teach us teach us more about understanding, but it can also be used as attitude inoculation. Yes, that's something from persuasion psychology. So I hope you enjoyed the psychology news section as much as I did. So let's move on to the personal update. So we're moving on to the personal update. So this week has been another relatively slow in terms of the placement because we're continuing with data collection. But I've been doing a few other bits for my placement. But there were two main things that I actually wanted to mention in this personal update. So I got one of the best emails I've ever had this week because it must be Thursday. Thursday, and I got up and everything, and then I checked my business emails, and then I found out that BBC Radio 5 had actually emailed me to as I do quite a bit on forensic psychology. Do I want to come on the radio and I talk about it? And it's a shame that I couldn't because I hadn't quite covered the topic that they wanted me to talk about, but it was really, really nice there. So I did just want to say a massive thank you for all of you who bought my books and listened to the podcast because without you then none of that would be possible though. So thank you. That was just such a great email. And something else that I wanted to mention though was, as I alluded to in the personal update on Wednesday, I went out on a university social, and when I say it like that, it makes it sound like I went clubbing, everything. No, I did not do that. For starters, that's not me. Yeah, but also that I just wouldn't personally in the pandemic there was all that it was that it was my first ever escape room, and they are great fun. I really do and then we all went out for dinner afterwards. Yes, that was nice, everything. And despite the restrictions being quite lax here, yeah, we're in England, it was all COVID safer. I did a test before I went, and then I've also been doing tests. I did one yesterday, did another one today because of my driving test. But the reason why I want to mention this is because, again, though, I just want to say that a university socials can be quite fun though. So if you're a university student who's been thinking about doing one, but you've always hesitated, then definitely give them a try that way because in my experience, I was not looking forward to it, but they are great fun and. Yeah, where they are great fun, and it's so nice to actually go out to talk to other university students and actually just be a part of that environment again. During my placement, there were. And also, they were because some students at this social, were PhD students, master students, final year students, it was actually really nice they were to get that nice broader mix. So, it's just we could all talk and actually have other input and just tell everyone else about our experiences. So I really do recommend it. And as always, I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. I've actually been having some great conversations with some wonderful people like this week. But especially about the dementia podcast episode. So a massive thank you to all of you for that. And you can also leave a comment on the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast. And you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi-whiteley. I always love to hear from all of you because it really does help make the podcast feel more like a conversation. And today's episode has been sponsored by Formulation in Psychotherapy. Yes, this is an absolutely brilliant book that will really help you understand what formulation is, why it's actually critical for the future of mental health treatment and psychotherapy. But then this book also goes in into tons of great depth about how all the different psychotherapies are CBT, narrative therapy, and systemic therapy, and also tons more about how they actually use formulation. So I cannot recommend enough. This is a really popular, really great, a wonderful book that's really easy to understand and engage in, and this will really help you develop your clinical psychology knowledge if that's something that you want to go into in the future though. So I cannot recommend it enough. So that is Formulation in Psychotherapy, available from all major ebook retailers, and you can order the large print, paperback and hardback versions from Amazon, your local bookstore and local library if you request it. And if you didn't want to buy a book but you still wanted to give the podcast a bit of one-time support, then you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley. So let's move on to the content of today's episode. So we're moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about 5 signs it might be time to start the therapy. So I've already explained why this is important though, because as university psychology students and psychology professionals, not only is this useful for us, our clients, and our friends and our family, but this is absolutely a critical for us though, because both our groups of these people, we will all experience high levels of stress. And sadly, we might experience things that cause us to develop a mental health condition. And this is why we need to look at this, because as much as we learn about psychotherapy and just clinical psychology as a whole and apply it to other people, sometimes we actually need to apply it to ourselves sometimes. But there are a lot more than 5 signs, but these are some of the most important ones. And of course, none of this is actually a official advice whatsoever. So the 5 signs. Considered it multiple times. So it's perfectly natural for all of us to think about something multiple times, and each time we dismiss it. I have done this so much recently because of a learning opportunity, but I just gave in at the end, and I have not regretted it so far, even though the learning opportunity will happen next year though. So this is really important to mention, because if you thought about it multiple times, then it means that you want to do it, but something is holding you back. For me and this learning opportunity, I really did want to do it because it would be great fun, and I know I could make money off it, but I wasn't sure if the actual course was actually worth the money though. And then in terms of psychotherapy, if you want to give it a try, just give it a go. At least if you do try it, you will finally know if it will help you, instead of forever wondering if it will work or not, because sometimes that if or that what if thinking, that thinking just isn't helpful. You want support after a stressful life event. And to be honest here, the words stressful and traumatic can actually just be used interchangeably. Some people experience a stressful life event that they want support for, but they can't, or they don't feel like they want to talk about it with their social network. And there are lots of different reasons for this, but in this case, those reasons are important. And then I wrote that, and I was thinking, well, yes, actually, because of how complex mental health is, they actually could be. Therefore, going to therapy could be a great option, as it allows these people to find professional support for their stressful life event, whilst the therapist teaches them ways to deal, cope, and move on with the event. And then, some of these examples that could include death of a loved one, fertility struggles, and experiencing a traumatic event. Stress is interfering with the sleep. So I know that I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but depression, rumination, and anxiety can all have an effect on a person's sleep. And then this lack of sleep or trouble sleeping can actually have a knock-on effect with the rest of their life, possibly leading to decreased life satisfaction. As well as these are potential explanations for why your sleep is bad. as well as all of these potential explanations for why their sleep is bad, could potentially be a reason to start exploring therapy, as a therapy could allow you to find out the cause of your sleeplessness, treat it, and then your sleep could return to healthy levels, because it's all well and good that it's interrupting your sleep so you can't get it. But then there's also another side of that which we need to look at, because what if you sleep too much? Because that's also a major factor in depression, or a major manifestation of depression. Basic life tasks are hard. We know from previous episodes on depression and other clinical psychology topics, a wide range of mental health conditions can make basic life tasks seem impossible, well, with these including things like showering, getting out of bed, and getting dressed. Therefore, if you're struggling with these simple tasks, then maybe a therapist might be able to help you figure out what's going on. And this was actually really well shown on the new Mind charity advert in the UK, actually explaining how some of these basic tasks are just so hard for them. So the final one is wondering if you're messed up. And of course, I just had to mention this because, of course, I just hate that term with an absolute passion. So as much as I do hate that term because it is absolutely wrong, because of course no one is messed up, but people have mental health difficulties that are maladaptive coping mechanisms. But the term messed up is what later people think, and even some psychology students and professionals. And yes, I'm always horrified when I find that out. So the term is sadly appropriate here. So some people might start thinking about their own behaviour and start to think something is wrong with them, or that they're simply messed up. And these could be behaviours normally associated with autism, ADHD, depression, or it could be other habits that the person is starting to question. For example, they could be concerned about their levels of exercise, smoking, or alcohol use. As a result, therapy is one option, because the therapist could do one of the two things for you. So one, the therapist could allow you to understand that there's nothing to be concerned about, and they could help you to accept yourself for who you are. And then two, they could do the exact same as above, but actually show you better, less damaging, and more effective coping mechanisms, because they discovered that you do have a mental health So all in all, that's just something to think about. Conclusion. Okay, this is what I spoke about in the psychology news section. So the entire real point of today's episode was just to remind you that as psychology students and psychology professionals, we need to take care of ourselves too, and this includes looking out for signs that we need therapy too, because it doesn't mean that we're failures, we're messed up, we're lost causes, that or we shouldn't be a clinical psychologist, or we shouldn't be a psychologist overall, because of course we've somehow messed up ourselves. It doesn't mean any of that. It just it simply means that we're human too. So as I've always said, and this is more aimed at psychology professionals here, we can't help anyone if we can't help ourselves. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode, and I hope that you got something out of it. If you know someone who would find today's episode useful, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when wonderful people help spread the word about the podcast. And please check out Buy Me a Coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Conwhitey, and definitely check out Formulation in Psychotherapy. It's an absolute brilliant book that I cannot recommend enough. Available in all of the usual places. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the show notes, then please go to conwhitely.net. And if you want a free 8-book psychology box set, then please go to conwhitely.net. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.